I never thought I'd be the guy sharing my story on a public forum, but here I am, pouring my heart out to strangers. My name is Mike, and I want to talk about how I found out that my wife, Sarah, was having an affair with my longtime mentor, Tom. Yeah, that Tom, the one who I looked up to for years, the guy who played a huge role in my career. It's a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately finding my own path to success. Sarah and I had been married for 7 years. Things started off great. We were young, in love, and building our lives together. She was charming, and we had the kind of chemistry that made you believe in soulmates. But as time went on, something changed. It wasn't overt at first, just little things. She'd come home late from work, always caught up with some emergency project, or she'd suddenly be too tired for our date nights, which used to be her favorite. I brushed it off as stress. Life had become busier for both of us. But then, the signs started to become hard to ignore. One evening, I was scrolling through social media, mindlessly, when I stumbled upon a picture of Sarah and Tom at a local bar. They looked too cozy, sharing a laugh over a drink. It made my stomach drop. I had always trusted Sarah completely, but the thought of her being out with Tom made my skin crawl. I knew they had become closer over the years since I began working under Tom's guidance, but I never imagined it would lead to this. My gut twisted into knots and my heart raced as I took a mental inventory of all the times she had been vague about her whereabouts. I started paying more attention to her behavior. Was she avoiding my calls? Why was she suddenly so fond of her girls' nights? Every time I saw her reach for her phone, a wave of anxiety crashed over me. I wanted to confront her, but something held me back. Part of me still wanted to believe she was just caught up in work. But everything changed one Saturday afternoon. I was cleaning out the garage when I noticed Sarah's purse stuffed in a corner. It wasn't unusual for her to leave it lying around, but this time I felt an overwhelming urge to look inside. I hesitated, thinking about trust and boundaries, but curiosity got the better of me. I unzipped it and rifled through her belongings. That's when I found it, a crumpled receipt from a hotel, dated just a few days prior, with a scribbled note that read, "Can't wait to see you again, T." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The world spun around me as the reality of what I had just discovered sank in. The betrayal was like poison coursing through my veins. I stumbled back, almost dropping the purse. I felt the heat rise in my chest, anger, pain, disbelief, and a feeling of loss that I had never known before. My fingers trembled as I processed what this meant. Sarah wasn't just caught up in work. She was having an affair with my mentor. The man I admired and respected was the one who had taken my wife from me. I spent the next hour pacing the garage, replaying every moment we had shared. The laughs, the late-night talks, her warm smile, all tainted by this revelation. I felt sick. I knew I had to confront her, but how? I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her feel the same anguish I was feeling. But I also knew I had to approach this with some level of composure. I couldn't let her see me crumble, even though I felt like I was about to fall apart. When she walked through the door that evening, I was ready. I had rehearsed 100 scenarios in my mind, but nothing could have prepared me for the confrontation ahead. I took a deep breath, standing in the living room with the receipt clutched tightly in my hand. She looked surprised to see me waiting for her, a hint of apprehension flickering across her face. I knew she sensed something was off, but she had no idea what was coming. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She frowned, the smile fading from her lips as she sensed the seriousness of the moment. I held up the receipt, my heart pounding. "What's this about?" Her face went pale. I watched as the color drained from her cheeks, and her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. "Mike, I can explain," she stammered. But deep down, I knew there was no explanation that could justify what she had done. And that's when the real emotional roller coaster began. Sarah's expression shifted from shock to defensive within a heartbeat. "Mike, please just let me explain." She blurted out, her voice rising a notch. I could see her scrambling for words, but they all felt like hollow lies. I was done with excuses. I needed the truth. "Explain. Explain what, Sarah? That you've been seeing Tom behind my back? That you lied to my face for God knows how long? What could you possibly say that could make this okay?" My pulse raced, and I fought against the tears that threatened to spill over. I had spent years building a life with her, and in seconds it felt like everything had come crashing down. She took a step closer, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for mine. "Mike, you're overreacting. This isn't what it looks like. Tom and I we were working late together. You know how he is. He's a mentor to both of us." Her voice was desperate, but the more she spoke, the more I felt my blood boil. "Working late, is that what you call it?" I snapped back, waving the receipt in front of her face. "Do you really think I'm that naive? You think I don't see what's been going on? You think I haven't noticed that you've been pulling away from me, that you've been lying?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief moment I felt a pang of sympathy, but it quickly evaporated as I remembered the betrayal. "I trusted you, Sarah. I thought we had something real, but you threw it all away for what?" "A fling with my mentor." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "It wasn't just a fling. I was confused, Mike. I felt neglected. You were so focused on your work with Tom, and I felt left out. Tom was there for me when I needed someone to talk to. I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything." I scoffed, incredulity flooding my lips. "If it didn't mean anything, then why the hotel? Why keep it a secret? You could have just talked to me if you felt neglected. We could have worked on it together. Instead, you chose to betray me." Her defenses crumbled slightly, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Mike. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. Tom made me feel special, and I got swept up in it. But I love you. I don't want to lose you." Love. The word felt tainted in her mouth now. Every time she had said it before sounded like a complete lie. It felt like a hollow echo of what used to bind us. "Love, you've shattered that trust. How can I believe anything you say right now?" I stood there, my heart pounding. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss. I was angry, but I also felt an overwhelming sense of loss. It was as if I were grieving not just the relationship, but the person I thought she was. The confrontation lasted for what felt like hours, filled with accusations and half-hearted apologies. No matter how hard she tried to convince me that it was a brief lapse in judgment, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a reflection of who she had become. The woman I had fallen in love with was slowly fading away, replaced by someone else. Eventually, I couldn't take any more. "I need time," I said, my voice firm even as my heart ached. "I can't do this right now." I turned away, knowing the conversation had reached a point of no return. I needed to process this betrayal without her tears clouding my judgment. That night, I slept on the couch, the weight of her betrayal heavy on my chest. I could hear her sobbing softly in our bedroom, and part of me wanted to comfort her. But I knew that would only muddy the waters further. I had to face the truth of what had happened, even if it was a painful truth. In the days that followed, my emotions swung like a pendulum: anger, sadness, disbelief. I felt like I was in a fog, moving through life on autopilot. I went to work, but my focus was shot. Every time I saw a photo of Tom on social media, every time I heard Sarah's voice, I felt the familiar rush of betrayal. It was like a wound. Wouldn't heal. Friends started noticing my change in demeanor. I had always been the guy who wore his heart on his sleeve, who laughed easily. But now I was tight-lipped and withdrawn. I confided in my best friend Jake, who listened patiently as I poured out my pain and confusion. "You deserve better, man," he said. "Don't let her walk all over you. Take control of your life." His words planted a seed in my mind. Maybe it was time to reclaim my life, to stop being a victim of their betrayal. I watched Sarah move around the house like a ghost, unsure of how to communicate with her. Every smile and laugh felt like a dagger to my heart. I had to make a decision, but it wasn't going to be easy. The thought of separating from her filled me with dread, but staying felt like torture. As I wrestled with my emotions, I realized that I had to focus on myself for a change. I needed to channel the pain into something productive, something that could fortify my spirit. That's when I began to plot a way to rise above both Sarah and Tom. I wanted to be better than them, not just for myself, but as a way to heal from this betrayal. It was a plan, but it was also a way to transform my pain into strength. Little did I know, my journey was just beginning. As the days turned into weeks, I started to put my plan into action. I had no interest in wallowing in self-pity any longer. Instead, I decided to turn my focus outward, pouring all my energy into my work. I had spent years under Tom's shadow, and it was time to carve out my own identity, to become the person I wanted to be. I dove into my projects with a renewed vigor, spending late nights at the office and seeking every opportunity to showcase my skills. I focused on learning as much as I could, taking on tasks that others shied away from, and pushing myself beyond the limits I had set for myself. I wanted to prove that I could be successful without the influence of Tom or anyone else. At work, I started to receive recognition for my efforts. My boss praised my dedication, and I even caught the eye of a few senior executives. I felt a sense of pride swell within me that I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was freeing to realize that I could achieve success on my own terms. Every compliment I received was like a balm for my wounded soul. But even as I built up my career, Sarah was lurking in the background, desperate to reconnect. She would leave me texts filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. "I miss you," she'd write. "Can we talk? I'm so sorry for everything. I love you, and I'll do anything to make this right." I would glance at her messages, my heart torn. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to return to the life we had built together. But another part of me screamed for self-preservation. I couldn't allow her to manipulate my emotions any longer. I remember one particularly difficult evening when I returned home after a long day at work. I found Sarah sitting at the dining table, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She had clearly been waiting for me. "Mike," she said softly, her voice shaking, "I can't keep doing this. We need to talk." I sighed, feeling my stomach twist. "What more is there to say, Sarah? You've made your choices." "I know I messed up," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I love you and I want to work through this together." I felt a mix of anger and sorrow rising within me. "Love, after what you did, you can't just erase this with a few words. You've shattered my trust. How can I believe you? How can I go back to the way things were?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, suddenly feeling suffocated. "You need to understand that I'm not the one who needs convincing here. You've created this mess, and now I have to decide what to do with it." I left her there, feeling the weight of her gaze on my back as I retreated to the living room. I cycled through my emotions again, anger, grief, disappointment. But I also felt a flicker of resolve. I would not be the victim in this story. I would forge my path and I would become better. As time passed, I started to gain momentum. In my career, my work was well received and I was offered a substantial promotion, a position that would place me in a leadership role, something I had long aspired to. The moment I received the news, I felt a rush of exhilaration wash over me. This was it. This was my chance to take control, to show both Sarah and Tom that I could succeed without their involvement. But with the promotion came a new responsibility. I was now in charge of a small team, and I wanted to make a good impression. I poured myself into mentorship, guiding my team members and fostering their development. In many ways, I was channeling all the pain I had experienced into a commitment to lift others up, to help them achieve their goals. Coincidentally, I discovered that Tom was going to be one of the keynote speakers at an upcoming industry conference. My stomach churned at the thought of seeing him again. He was still the respected figure in our field, and I felt a mixture of rage and anxiety at the thought of sharing a space with him. I debated whether or not to attend, but ultimately I decided I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. The day of the conference arrived and I walked in with my head held high. I was no longer the timid guy who had been overshadowed by Tom's presence. I had fought back with everything I had and I was ready to reclaim my narrative. As I navigated through the crowd, I spotted him on stage, confidently addressing an audience filled with eager professionals. The way he spoke, the way he commanded attention, it was everything I had aspired to be, but I knew I was on my way there too. The applause rang out as he concluded his speech, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Afterward, I felt compelled to approach him. I had rehearsed 100 lines in my head, but when I stood in front of him, all I felt was a mixture of disdain and determination. "Tom," I said, forcing a smile, "congratulations on your talk." He turned toward me, a hint of recognition flashing in his eyes. "Mike, great to see you, man. I've heard you've been doing some impressive work lately." "Yeah, well, let's just say I've finally stepped out from your shadow," I replied, surprising even myself with my boldness. "I'm excited about where my career is heading." His smile faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure. "That's great to hear. Remember, I'm always here if you need advice or guidance." That statement felt like a slap. I had no interest in seeking his guidance anymore. I was on my own path now, and I didn't need Tom's approval to validate my success. "Thanks, but I think I'm good," I replied, my tone firm. "I've learned a lot and I'm ready to carve my own way." I walked away from him, a sense of satisfaction swelling within me. I realized that I was no longer the man who had been betrayed. I was a man in control of his destiny. I was building something for myself, something that would ultimately exceed the expectations of both Sarah and Tom. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I knew that I still had a long way to go in terms of healing and rebuilding, but I was finally starting to feel like myself again. The next step was figuring out what I wanted to do about Sarah. I had put my heart into my career, but I still had to address the gaping wound of our relationship. The time for confrontation was coming again, but this time it would be on my terms. With renewed determination, I knew I had to face Sarah again. I had spent weeks rebuilding my career and reestablishing my sense of self, but I couldn't ignore the unresolved feelings I had regarding our relationship. It was time to confront the ghost of our marriage and find a resolution, whatever that might look like. The following weekend, I asked Sarah to meet at our favorite coffee shop. It felt surreal to be going back to a place that once held fond memories, now clouded by betrayal and regret. As I walked through the door, the familiar smell of coffee and pastries mixed with the tension brewing inside me. I spotted Sarah sitting at a table, nervously tapping her fingers against the wood. "Hey," she greeted, her voice subdued. She looked different, her makeup slightly smudged, as if she had been crying. Part of me felt a flicker of concern, but I quickly pushed it aside. "Hey," I replied, forcing a smile. "Thanks for coming." I sat down across from her, trying to gauge her expression. She looked hopeful yet anxious, an odd combination that made me feel unsettled. "I've missed you," she began, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I know things have been rough and I can't express how truly sorry I am for everything. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I want to make this work, Mike. I love you." Her words stung like salt in a wound. "You say you love me, but love doesn't betray. Love doesn't sneak around behind your partner back," I replied, my voice steady but cold. "You shattered my trust, Sarah. It's not something that can just mend overnight." "I know," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't change what I did, but I want to prove to you that I can be the partner you deserve. I'm willing to go to counseling, to do whatever it takes." Counseling. It was a word I had tossed around in my own mind, a potential lifeline to salvage what was left of our relationship. But I wasn't ready to commit to that. "Yet counseling might help, but it's not a magic fix and it doesn't erase what you did," I replied, glancing away to gather my thoughts. "You need to understand that I'm not the same person I was before all of this. I can't just go back to how things were. It feels insincere." She sighed deeply, running her fingers through her hair. "I understand that you're hurt and you have every right to be, but I want to show you that I've changed. I've realized how much you mean to me. I want to rebuild what we had to earn back your trust." Her desperation tugged at my heartstrings, but I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. "Rebuilding trust takes time, Sarah. It's not something that can happen overnight, and I don't even know if I want to try." I paused, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. "I need to focus on me right now. I've been through hell and back, and I can't carry the weight of this relationship alone. It's your turn to take responsibility for the damage you've caused." Her eyes filled with tears, and I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. "I'm not saying we can't try to work on things, but I need space. I need to figure out what I want without being influenced by your pleas and regrets. You need to understand that I don't want to be your safety net while you sort through your feelings." She nodded, tears spilling over as she wiped them away. "I understand. I'll give you the space you need, but please remember that I'm here when you're ready." I wanted to be angry, to shout and tell her how deeply she had hurt me, but instead I felt a sense of peace in setting a boundary. "Thank you for understanding," I said, knowing it was the right decision for both of us, even if it felt painful in the moment. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt lighter, yet a mix of sadness lingered. Knowing I had taken a step toward reclaiming my life, I realized I couldn't rush the healing process. I had been in a state of chaos for too long, and it was time to turn that chaos into progress. Over the next few weeks, I continued to pour myself into work while keeping my distance from Sarah. I started to embrace new hobbies, hiking on weekends, joining a local volleyball league, and even taking cooking classes. I found joy in these activities, and it helped me regain a sense of normalcy. But there was still an emptiness in my heart, a lingering connection to Sarah that I couldn't quite sever. I thought about our shared memories, the laughter, and the dreams we had once built together. I found myself wondering if it was possible to rebuild something from the ashes of our past. Meanwhile, I began to hear whispers around the office about potential promotions and projects. I was at the center of discussions, and the recognition felt validating. But at the same time, I was determined to keep my success separate from the turmoil in my personal life. I was on a path to greatness, and I refused to let my past hold me back. One evening, just as I was wrapping up another successful week at work, I received a message from Tom. "Hey Mike, congrats on all the recent achievements. I'd love to catch up and hear how you've been doing. Let's grab dinner next week if you're available." My stomach churned at the thought of meeting him. How could I sit across from the man who played a role in my wife's betrayal and act like everything was fine? But I also recognized that I had grown stronger and I wasn't afraid anymore. I needed to face this chapter of my life head-on. I sighed and typed out a response. "Sure, Tom, I'm free next Thursday." As I hit send, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I was finally taking control of my narrative, confronting the people and situations that had caused me pain. I was no longer just a victim of betrayal. I was a man who was rising from the ashes, determined to soar higher than anyone imagined. But the confrontation with Tom loomed ahead, and I was both anxious and ready. I needed to reclaim my identity, not just as Mike the husband or Mike the mentee, but as Mike the man who had the strength to rise above and succeed on his own terms. It was time to show not only Tom but also myself what I was truly capable of. The time for vengeance was upon me, but it wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive in spite of the betrayal. As I prepared for dinner with Tom, I steeled myself for the confrontation that would surely come. I was ready for whatever lay ahead. Thursday arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as I got ready for dinner with Tom. I had spent the entire day going over what I wanted to say, practicing my composure in front of the mirror. This meeting wasn't just about catching up. It was a chance for me to confront the man who had crossed the line and shattered my trust. We met at a trendy restaurant downtown, a place buzzing with energy and laughter. As I approached the table, I spotted Tom sitting there, his usual confident demeanor on full display. He looked up as I approached, and a smile spread across his face. "Mike, it's great to see you, man. You've really been making waves lately." "Thanks, Tom," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "It's been a busy time." We settled into conversation, exchanging pleasantries about work and life. He asked about my projects and I shared my recent successes, making sure to emphasize the strides I had taken since our last interaction. But beneath the surface, the tension simmered, waiting for the right moment to boil over. After we ordered our meals, I could feel the conversation shifting. "I've seen some of your recent work and I have to say I'm impressed," Tom said, leaning back in his chair, the pride in his tone evident. "I always knew you had it in you." I took a deep breath, feeling the moment had arrived. "Thanks, Tom, but I have to say it feels good to finally step out from your shadow." His expression faltered for a moment, surprise flickering in his eyes before he regained his composure. "What do you mean by that?" I leaned in, feeling the weight of my emotions. "Let's not beat around the bush. You know that your mentorship came with strings attached. I was always seen as Tom's protege. But I want to be recognized for my own achievements now. You and Sarah, the affair, it changed everything." He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and I could see how my words were beginning to sink in. "Mike, let me finish," I interrupted, my voice steady and resolute. "I have no interest in being your pawn anymore. What happened between you and Sarah was a betrayal that affected not only my marriage but my career. I've had to work 10 times harder to prove myself, and I'm done pretending that it didn't hurt me." Tom sat back, visibly taken aback. "I didn't realize it had such a profound impact on you," he said, his tone shifting to one of defensiveness. "I didn't set out to hurt you. It was never my intention." "Intention or not, the damage is done," I replied sharply. "You might see yourself as a mentor, but you crossed a line that should never have been crossed. You should have respected my relationship with Sarah instead of pursuing her. You took advantage of my trust, and that's something I can't overlook." His eyes narrowed, and I could sense his defensiveness rising. "It was a mistake, Mike. Relationships can be complicated. I thought you understood that." "Complicated? That's one way to put it," I shot back. "But let's be real. There's a difference between a complicated relationship and deceit. You chose to engage in an affair with my wife, and I can't just forget that. It's not something I can overlook just because you're remorseful now." The tension hung thick in the air as we locked eyes. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, weighing his options. "Mike, I'm sorry for what happened, but I think you're misjudging the situation. Sarah and it was a moment of weakness. We never planned for it." I scoffed, shaking my head. "A moment of weakness, that's not how I see it. You betrayed my trust and then tried to justify it. You may think we can move past this like it's just business, but this is personal. You don't just get to brush it under the rug." He seemed to finally grasp the gravity of what had transpired. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mike. I thought we could still be friends despite everything that happened." "Friends?" I leaned in closer, my eyes narrowing. "Friends don't sleep with each other's spouses. This isn't some trivial misunderstanding. You've changed the course of my life, and I refuse to let you pretend it didn't happen." Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I get it, and I respect that you're standing your ground, but you have to understand that I never anticipated this. I didn't mean for it to become what it did." "Then why didn't you stop it when you had the chance?" I countered, feeling my anger boil over again. "You had a choice, Tom. I respected you, and you took that respect and threw it away. The only thing you've taught me is to be cautious about who I trust." The weight of my words hung between us, and for a moment the restaurant noise faded into the background. I could see the realization dawning on him, and a hint of regret crossed his features. "You're right, Mike. I messed up, and I'll have to live with that." As I dug into the depths of my emotions, I realized I had to say one more thing. "I'm not here seeking your forgiveness or approval. I'm here to tell you that I'm done being influenced by your actions. I'm carving my own path, and I intend to do it without you." Tom nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a mix of remorse and understanding. "I respect that, I really do. I hope one day you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't." "Forgiveness isn't something that can be rushed," I replied, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "But I'll take this experience and use it to fuel my journey. I'm on the rise now, and I won't let anyone stop me." As we finished our meal, the conversation shifted to more neutral topics, but the dynamic had changed irrevocably. Tom may have been a mentor once, but now he was just another chapter in my past, a lesson learned, a hurdle overcome. When I left the restaurant that night, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I had confronted the person who had betrayed me, and I had walked away with my head held high. I knew the road ahead was still uncertain, especially concerning Sarah, but I felt empowered to continue my journey toward success. I didn't have all the answers about my marriage, but I now understood that I was the one in control. My narrative. I was ready to write the next chapter, and I would do it on my own terms. The time for healing was upon me, but I was determined to emerge stronger, both personally and professionally. The next phase of my life was waiting, and I was more than ready to embrace it. After my dinner with Tom, I felt a strange sense of empowerment wash over me. It was liberating to confront the source of my pain, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. But while I had made tremendous strides in my professional life, I still had to face the uncomfortable reality of my personal life, specifically my relationship with Sarah. The days following my meeting with Tom were a whirlwind of emotions. I focused on my work, poured myself into projects, and even took on some challenging tasks that had always intimidated me. Recognition continued to flow in, and I could feel my confidence growing. But there was still a lingering shadow, Sarah and the unresolved feelings that came with our relationship. I knew I had to have one final conversation with her to lay everything out on the table. I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at our usual park. It was a place that had held so many memories for us, and I hoped it would provide a neutral ground for what we needed to discuss. When I arrived, I spotted her sitting on a bench, fiddling with her hands as she looked lost in thought. The sight of her brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad. I took a deep breath and approached her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Hey," I said softly as I sat next to her. "Hey," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were red and puffy, and I could tell she had been crying again. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I couldn't let it sway me from my intentions. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, choosing my words carefully. "About us, our marriage, and what happened between you and Tom." She nodded, her expression somber. "I know I've messed everything up, Mike. I don't expect you to just forgive me, but I want you to know I'm willing to do anything to fix this. I love you and I miss you." I felt a mix of anger and sadness at her words. "You love me after everything that's happened. How can I trust that love isn't just a word to you? Love should mean honesty and respect, not betrayal." "I understand," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was weak and I made choices that hurt you. I can't change the past, but I want to fight for our future. I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve." Her desperation tugged at my heart, but I steeled myself. "Sarah, I've spent so long trying to decide whether to forgive you or walk away. But I need to be honest. I don't know if I can trust you again. The truth is, I've spent this time focusing on myself, on rebuilding my life and my career, and I've realized that I might be better off without you." Her eyes widened in shock, and I could see the realization hitting her. "Are you saying you want to end things, just like that?" "I think it's what's best for both of us," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've grown and changed during this time, and I don't want to go back to the way things were. I need to move forward, and I can't do that if we're stuck in this cycle of pain and betrayal." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "Mike, please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling, we can try again. I can change. I'll do anything. I appreciate that you want to change, but change takes time. And I need time away from you to figure out who I am without you. I've realized I need to find my own happiness, even if it means letting go of what we had." As the words left my mouth, I felt both relief and sadness. This was the moment I had been building up to, the moment I needed to reclaim my life. I had tried to hold on to the idea of us for far too long, but it was time to accept the reality of what we had become. "I don't want us to end like this," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "I still love you. I wish I could take back what I did." I leaned back, my heart aching at her pain. "I know you do, but wishing won't change the past. Maybe one day we can find a way to move forward as friends, but right now I need space." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the conversation hanging heavily between us. I could see the realization settling in her eyes. This was it. The end of our chapter together. Eventually, I stood up, trying to gather the strength to walk away. "I hope you find happiness, Sarah. I truly do, but I need to focus on my own journey now." As I walked away, a mix of memories flooded my mind, the laughter, the love, the dreams we had built together. But I also felt a profound sense of clarity. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was someone who had risen stronger from the ashes. I had learned valuable lessons about trust, love, and self-worth. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to embrace it. I had reclaimed my identity and my career, and it was time to forge my own path. I was determined to build a future filled with possibilities, one where I could thrive, succeed, and perhaps even find love again. As I walked away from the park, I felt lighter, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I had taken control of my narrative, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The sun was shining, and the world felt full of potential. My life was just beginning, and I was excited to see where this new path would lead.